The bruise on Hannah Novak's cheekbone was still fresh when she stumbled through the general store's door. Her basket clutched so tightly in her trembling hands that her knuckles had turned white as bone. The year was 1881, and Cripple Creek, Colorado, was just beginning to find its footing as a cattle town, still rough around the edges, still wild in ways that made survival feel like a daily negotiation with fate. Hannah had learned that lesson the hard way over the past 3 years of marriage to Victor Novak, a ranch hand with fists faster than his brain and a temper that burned hotter than the summer sun beating down on the dusty main street outside. She had taken too long at the market that morning, or so Victor had screamed before his hand connected with her face. Mrs. Patterson at the dry goods counter had been showing her the new calico fabric that had just arrived from Denver, talking about her daughter's upcoming wedding, and Hannah had lingered, soaking in the kindness like a woman dying of thirst. 20 minutes, maybe 30 at most. But Victor had been waiting outside the store, having finished his business at the saloon earlier than expected, and his rage had been immediate and volcanic. Now Hannah moved through the aisles with frantic speed, grabbing flour, sugar, coffee, salt pork, anything her shaking hands could reach. Her vision blurred with unshed tears as she calculated how quickly she could finish and get home before Victor's mood darkened further. The afternoon sun slanted through the store's windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny witnesses to her humiliation. "Madam, you dropped this," a deep voice said from behind her. Hannah spun around, her heart hammering, and found herself looking up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man standing before her was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that brushed his collar and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. He wore dusty denim and leather, a weathered Stetson in his hand, and there was something in his expression, something careful and concerned, that made her throat tighten. He held out a small tin of baking powder that must have fallen from her basket. "Thank you," Hannah whispered, reaching for it. Her sleeve slid back as she did, revealing the finger-shaped bruises on her wrist. The cowboy's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His eyes flicked from her wrist to her face, taking in the purpling bruise on her cheekbone that she had tried and failed to cover with powder. He did not speak immediately, just stood there holding the tin between them like an offering. "I should go," Hannah said quickly, pulling her sleeve down. "I need to finish and get home." "Take your time," the cowboy said quietly. His voice was gentle, almost impossibly so for a man his size. "There is no rush." Hannah's breath caught. Those simple words, spoken with such calm certainty, felt like water on a flame. She had not realized how much she needed to hear them until they hung in the air between them. For 3 years, her entire existence had been measured in rushed moments and frantic calculations, always trying to stay ahead of Victor's anger, always failing. "I cannot," she managed. "My husband, he is waiting." The cowboy's expression did not change, but something flickered in those blue eyes. "Is he the one who gave you that bruise?" Hannah's face burned with shame. She wanted to lie, to protect the secret that everyone in town already knew, but politely ignored. Instead, she found herself nodding, just once, a tiny movement that felt like a confession. "Then he can wait a little longer," the cowboy said. His voice was still gentle, but there was steel underneath now. "You take all the time you need, madam. I will make sure of it." Before Hannah could protest, he turned and walked toward the front of the store. She stood frozen, watching as he stepped outside into the bright afternoon sunshine. Through the window, she could see Victor leaning against the hitching post, his face already red with impatience. She saw the cowboy approach him, saw Victor straighten up with aggressive posture, saw the two men begin to talk. Mrs. Patterson appeared at Hannah's elbow. "That is Jack Crawford," the older woman said quietly. "He just got hired on at the Double C Ranch outside town. Word is he came up from Texas, worked cattle drives from San Antonio to Dodge City. Has a reputation for being fair, but not one to cross." Hannah watched as Jack said something that made Victor's face go even redder. Victor gestured angrily toward the store, but Jack simply stood his ground, his posture relaxed but unmovable. It reminded Hannah of the way a good horse could be, calm but powerful, aware of its own strength and unworried by bluster. "You finish your shopping, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, patting Hannah's arm. "Take your time." The words were the same ones Jack had said, and Hannah felt something crack open inside her chest. Something that had been sealed shut for so long she had forgotten it existed. She moved through the store slowly now, carefully, taking the time to select ripe apples instead of grabbing the first ones she saw, comparing prices on the different cuts of meat, even allowing herself to pause and touch the pretty calico fabric Mrs. Patterson had wanted to show her earlier. Outside, Jack and Victor continued their conversation. From what Hannah could see, it remained civil, though Victor's body language screamed frustration. Jack simply stood there, one hand resting casually on his belt, talking in that same calm way he had spoken to her. He was not threatening, not aggressive, but somehow he had managed to root Victor to the spot. Hannah took nearly an hour to complete her shopping, longer than she had taken in months. Her basket filled with everything she needed and even a few small luxuries she would never have dared to select before. A small jar of honey, a lemon for tea, 2 peppermint sticks that she tucked into the bottom of the basket like secrets. When she finally approached the counter to pay, Mrs. Patterson tallied everything up with a smile. As Hannah counted out her coins, she glanced out the window again. Jack was still there, and so was Victor, though her husband now sat on the edge of the wooden sidewalk, looking defeated and confused. "That will be $2.30, Mrs. Patterson said. Hannah's heart sank. She counted her coins again, but came up 20 cents short. Victor always gave her exact change, down to the penny, calculated to cover only the essentials on the list he made her memorize. The honey and lemon and peppermint had pushed her over. "I am sorry," Hannah said, her face burning. "I will need to put something back." "The honey," Mrs. Patterson said immediately, already reaching for it. "No," Jack's voice said from the doorway. "I will cover the difference." Hannah spun around. Jack had come inside so quietly she had not heard him. He stood there with his hat still in his hand, dust on his boots, and pulled a worn leather coin purse from his pocket. He placed a quarter on the counter. "That is not necessary," Hannah protested. "I know," Jack said simply. "But I am doing it anyway." Mrs. Patterson swept the coin into her till and began wrapping Hannah's purchases in brown paper. Hannah stood there, torn between gratitude and mortification, aware of Victor fuming outside, but unable to move. Jack made no move to leave either. He simply stood there, a solid presence between her and the door, between her and her husband, between her and everything that waited outside. "Your husband has agreed to wait at the saloon for the next hour," Jack said quietly. "He will not be bothering you on your way home." Hannah's eyes widened. "How did you convince him to do that?" Jack's lips quirked slightly, not quite a smile. "I bought him a bottle of whiskey and suggested he might enjoy it more than standing in the heat. He saw the wisdom in that." It was the most ridiculous and wonderful thing Hannah had ever heard. She felt a laugh bubble up in her throat, unexpected and almost painful. It came out as a sound somewhere between a sob and a giggle, and she quickly pressed her hand to her mouth. Jack's expression softened. "You have a nice laugh," he said. "You should use it more often." Mrs. Patterson finished wrapping the parcels and handed them to Hannah with a meaningful look. "You come back any time, dear. Any time at all." Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. She gathered her packages and turned to Jack. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling entirely inadequate for what he had done, for what he had given her. "My pleasure, madam," Jack said. He held the door open for her, then followed her outside. The street was busy with afternoon traffic, wagons and horses and people going about their business. The saloon stood at the far end of the street, its bat-wing doors swinging as men came and went. Hannah could not see Victor, which meant he was inside, and she felt herself relax, fractionally. May I walk you home? Jack asked. Hannah hesitated. Her house was a small cabin on the edge of town, a 15-minute walk that she usually made alone. Having Jack accompany her would surely anger Victor further, but the thought of those 15 minutes in his company, away from her husband's rage, felt like the most precious gift anyone had ever offered her. Yes, she said softly. Please. They walked in silence at first, Jack matching his long stride to her shorter steps. The afternoon sun was warm but not oppressive, and a breeze carried the scent of pine from the surrounding hills. Hannah felt hyper-aware of Jack's presence beside her, the way he positioned himself slightly between her and the street, the way his eyes scanned their surroundings with the automatic alertness of someone accustomed to danger. How long have you been married? Jack asked after a while. 3 years. Hannah's voice was barely above a whisper. We married in Denver. Victor worked for my father's freight company. He seemed kind then, or maybe I just wanted to believe he was. Jack nodded slowly. People can hide their true nature for a time. It is not your fault for not seeing it. Those words hit Hannah like a physical blow, so unexpected in their absolution that she felt tears prick her eyes. Everyone else in town, even the kind ones like Mrs. Patterson, treated her situation with pity, but also with a certain acceptance. This was simply how things were for some women. She had made her choice in marrying Victor, and now she had to live with it. No one had ever suggested that his violence was not somehow her failure, her fault, her burden to bear. Why did you help me today? She asked, the question coming out more sharply than she intended. You do not know me. This is not your concern. Jack was quiet for a moment, his boots crunching on the packed dirt road. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. My mother was like you, he said. My father had a temper and fists to match. She died when I was 12, fell down the stairs, or so he claimed. I was too young to help her, too small to stand between them. I swore then that if I ever saw another woman in that situation, and I was big enough to do something about it, I would. Hannah's throat closed up entirely. She looked at Jack's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the far-off look in his eyes that spoke of old pain and older promises. I am sorry, she managed. Do not be sorry for things that are not your fault, Jack said, echoing his earlier sentiment. Just know that you are not alone. Not anymore. They reached Hannah's cabin too soon. It was a simple structure, weathered wood, and a sagging porch, but Hannah had tried to make it a home. Flowers grew in a small garden beside the door, cheerful yellow blooms that she watered faithfully every evening. Jack helped her carry her packages up the steps and set them by the door. Thank you, Hannah said again, for everything. Jack settled his hat back on his head. I work at the Double C Ranch, about 5 miles north of town. If you ever need help for any reason, you send word, or you come yourself. I will be there. Hannah nodded, knowing she would never take him up on the offer, but grateful for it nonetheless. Jack tipped his hat to her and turned to leave. She watched him walk back down the path toward town, his figure growing smaller against the afternoon light, and felt something she had not felt in 3 years. Hope. The next weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Victor had come home that first night drunk and sullen, but he had not hit her. He had demanded to know what she had said to the cowboy, what lies she had told, and Hannah had answered truthfully that she had said very little. Victor had not believed her, but he had also not raised his fist. Something about his encounter with Jack had shaken him in a way Hannah had never seen before. She went to town for supplies every week, as always, but now Victor no longer accompanied her. He gave her the money and sent her on her way, his jaw tight with suppressed anger, but his hands to himself. Hannah suspected he was avoiding another encounter with Jack Crawford. Jack was often in town on those days. Hannah told herself it was coincidence that a ranch hand naturally had business in Cripple Creek, but she noticed that he always seemed to be near the general store around the time she shopped. They would nod to each other in greeting, exchange a few words about the weather or the condition of the roads, nothing that could be called improper. But those brief moments became the bright spots in Hannah's week, small islands of kindness in an ocean of tension. One Saturday in late September, Hannah arrived at the store to find Mrs. Patterson in a state of agitation. "Hannah, thank goodness," the older woman said, wringing her hands. "My daughter has taken ill, and I need to close the store and go to her. She lives in Victor, about 20 miles south. Would you mind terribly coming back tomorrow?" "Of course not," Hannah said immediately. "I hope she recovers quickly." Mrs. Patterson was already untying her apron. "You are a dear. Tell your husband I am sorry for the inconvenience." Hannah stood on the sidewalk as Mrs. Patterson locked up and hurried to her wagon. The afternoon stretched before her, suddenly free and formless. She should go home, she knew. Victor expected her to complete her errands and return. But the thought of walking back to that cabin with her empty basket, of facing his questions about why she had come home early, made her feel trapped and desperate. She found herself walking instead toward the edge of town, where a small creek cut through a stand of cottonwood trees. She had not been here since before she was married, but she remembered it as a peaceful place, shaded and cool. Her feet carried her there almost automatically, seeking refuge. The creek was exactly as she remembered, clear water running over smooth stones, the trees forming a canopy overhead that filtered the sunlight into dancing patterns. Hannah sat on a fallen log and took off her bonnet, letting the breeze cool her face. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine what her life might have been if she had made different choices, if she had seen Victor's true nature before she married him, if she had the courage to leave. "Beautiful spot," Jack's voice said, and Hannah's eyes flew open. He stood a few yards away, his horse grazing behind him. He must have come upon her quietly, not wanting to startle her. In the dappled light beneath the trees, he looked like something out of a story, tall and strong and impossibly kind. "I am sorry," Hannah said, standing quickly. "I should not be here." "Why not?" Jack asked. He moved closer, looping his horse's reins around a low branch. "It is a public creek and a fine afternoon. Seems like the perfect place to be." Hannah sat back down slowly, her heart racing. "The store was closed. Mrs. Patterson's daughter is ill. I should go home, but I just needed a moment to breathe." Jack lowered himself to sit on the log beside her, keeping a respectful distance between them. "Then breathe," he said simply. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water and the whisper of wind through the cottonwood leaves. Hannah felt the tension slowly drain from her shoulders. There was something about Jack's presence that made her feel safe, protected in a way she had not felt since she was a child. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said finally. "Anything. Why have you not married? A man like you, surely there have been women interested." Jack smiled slightly, looking out at the creek. "There have been a few," he admitted, "but I have spent most of my adult life on cattle drives, moving from place to place. That is no life to offer a woman, and I suppose I have been waiting for the right one, someone who makes staying put seem worth it." Hannah's breath caught at the way he looked at her as he said that last part, his blue eyes steady and intent. She knew she should look away, should remember her vows and her place, but she could not seem to move. "Hannah," Jack said quietly, "I need to say something, and I hope you will not take offense." She waited, her heart pounding. "You deserve better than what you have," Jack continued. "You deserve kindness and respect and a man who values you. You deserve to laugh without fear, to take all the time you need at the market or anywhere else, to live without walking on eggshells. I know I have no right to say these things to you, that you are another man's wife, but I cannot stay silent when I see you hurting." Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks before she could stop them. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Jack moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel his warmth, his solidity. "I am trapped," Hannah whispered through her tears. Even if I wanted to leave, where would I go? What would I do? I have no money, no family here. My father disowned me when I married Victor. I have nothing. You have more than you think, Jack said. You have strength, Hannah. I have seen it in the way you keep going. Keep finding small joys, like flowers in your garden and pretty fabric in the store. That kind of strength is rare and precious. Hannah lowered her hands and looked at him. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. Jack reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was feather-light, achingly tender. I know enough, he said. I know that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since that first day in the store. I know that I find excuses to be in town on Saturdays just to see you, even if we only exchange a few words. I know that the thought of you going home to a man who hurts you makes me want to tear the world apart, and I know that is not fair to say to you that I am putting a burden on you by speaking these feelings, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel them. Hannah's hand moved of its own accord, covering his where it still rested against her cheek. I feel it too, she whispered. God help me, but I have been thinking of you constantly. You have become the bright spot in my days, the thing that gives me reason to keep going. That is wrong of me, I know. I am married, and I should not have these feelings for another man. Love is not wrong, Jack said. It is the most right thing in the world. What is wrong is a man who beats his wife, who treats her like property instead of a person. That is the real sin, Hannah. They sat there, hands touching, faces close. The world narrowed down to just this moment under the cottonwood trees. Hannah knew she should pull away, should run back to her cabin and never speak to Jack again. But she could not make herself move. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, drawn by something stronger than fear or duty or vows spoken to the wrong man. Jack met her halfway, his lips touching hers in a kiss so gentle it felt like a question. Hannah answered by pressing closer, her hands sliding from his cheek to the back of his neck, her fingers tangling in his dark hair. The kiss deepened, and Hannah felt something inside her come alive, a part of herself she had thought dead and buried. This was what it was supposed to feel like, she realized. Connection, desire, tenderness all woven together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. I want to protect you, he said roughly. I want to give you the life you deserve. Tell me how to do that, Hannah. Tell me what you need. Hannah closed her eyes, her mind racing. What she needed was impossible. She needed to be free of Victor, but divorce was scandalous and nearly impossible to obtain, especially for a woman with no resources. She needed safety and security, but she had neither. She needed time to figure out her next steps, but Victor would not give her that. I do not know, she admitted. All I know is that this, right here with you, is the happiest I have been in 3 years, and I am terrified that it will end, that I will have to go back to pretending I do not feel this way, that you do not exist. Then do not go back, Jack said. Not today. Stay here with me for a while longer. Take the time you need. We will figure out the rest later. So Hannah stayed. They talked for hours under those cottonwood trees, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Jack told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to rope and ride from ranch hands who took pity on the boy with the brutal father. He told her about the cattle drives, the endless sky, and the freedom of the open range, the camaraderie of the cowboys who became his chosen family. He told her about coming to Colorado looking for steadier work, tired of constant movement, ready to put down roots if he could find the right place. Hannah told him about her childhood in Denver, daughter of a successful freight company owner, educated and privileged until she made the mistake of falling for Victor's charm. She told him about the gradual realization that she had married a monster the first time he hit her. The way she had convinced herself it would get better if she just tried harder, was more obedient, more careful, She told him about the loneliness, the isolation, the way she had stopped recognizing herself in the mirror. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack took her hand. I meant what I said before, he told her. If you ever need help, you come to me. Anytime, day or night. I will be there. Victor would kill you, Hannah said, fear sharp in her voice. He owns 3 guns, and he has a terrible temper. If he thought you and I were close, he would not hesitate to use them. Let him try, Jack said with quiet confidence. I am not afraid of your husband, Hannah. I am only afraid of leaving you in danger. Hannah squeezed his hand. I need to go home before he comes looking for me, but thank you for today. For everything. Jack walked her back to the edge of town, where they parted ways with reluctance. Hannah made the rest of the journey alone, her heart lighter than it had been in years, despite the fear that tangled with hope in her chest. When she reached her cabin, Victor's horse was not yet outside, which meant he was still at work or drinking in town. She put away her empty basket and began preparing supper, moving through the familiar motions while her mind replayed every moment with Jack, every word and touch treasured like gold. Victor came home late, stumbling and drunk. He barely looked at Hannah, just grunted something about his food and collapsed into bed. She cleaned the kitchen in silence, grateful for his inattention, and allowed herself to think about Jack's kiss, the promise in his eyes, the possibility of something more. The next weeks brought more stolen moments. Hannah found reasons to be in town more often, and Jack always seemed to be there. They met by the creek when they could, talking and kissing and planning impossible futures. Hannah knew it was dangerous, knew that discovery would mean disaster, but she could not stop herself. Jack had awakened something in her that refused to be smothered again. On a cold October morning, everything changed. Hannah was at home, hanging laundry in the yard despite the chill, when she heard Victor's horse approach. He was supposed to be at work, helping with the cattle roundup, and his unexpected return made her stomach clench with anxiety. Victor dismounted roughly, his face dark with rage. You lying witch, he snarled, striding toward her. Hannah backed up, her heart hammering. What are you talking about? Tom Brennan saw you down by the creek with that cowboy, Victor spat. He said you were kissing him, carrying on like a common whore. Is this what you do when I am working, earning money to keep a roof over your head? Victor, please, Hannah started, but she got no further. His fist caught her in the stomach, driving the air from her lungs. She doubled over, gasping, and his next blow sent her sprawling in the dirt. The laundry basket overturned, clean clothes spilling across the ground. 3 years I have put up with you, Victor shouted, kicking her in the ribs. 3 years of your useless cooking and your sullen face and your lazy ways. And this is how you repay me? By spreading your legs for some drifter? Hannah curled into a ball, trying to protect herself as Victor rained blows on her back and shoulders. Pain exploded through her body with each impact. She tried to scream, but her lungs would not cooperate. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. Then suddenly the blows stopped. Hannah heard scuffling, a grunt of pain that was not hers, and she forced her eyes open to see Jack hauling Victor backward. Jack's face was a mask of cold fury as he threw Victor to the ground. You touch her again and I will kill you, Jack said, his voice deadly calm. Do you understand me? Victor scrambled to his feet, going for the gun at his hip. Jack was faster, his own revolver clearing leather and cocking before Victor's hand even reached his weapon. Do not, Jack warned. I am a better shot than you, and right now I would welcome the excuse. Victor froze, his hand still hovering near his gun. His eyes darted between Jack and Hannah, calculating odds and finding them poor. She is my wife, he said, but there was fear in his voice now. You have no right to interfere between a man and his wife. She is a human being who deserves to be treated with dignity, Jack corrected, something you have failed to understand. Now you're going to get on your horse and ride into town. You are going to pack your things and leave Cripple Creek. Today. Like hell I will, Victor blustered. This is my home, my wife. You cannot make me leave. Jack's gun did not waver. I can and I will. You have two choices. Leave on your own, or I will bring charges against you for assault. I am a witness now, and there are enough decent people in this town who will testify to your treatment of Hannah. You will end up in jail at best, at the end of a rope at worst, if that beating had killed her. Victor's face went through several shades of red and purple. He looked at Hannah, still curled on the ground, and something ugly twisted his features. You are not worth this trouble, he spat. You were never worth anything. Good riddance. He mounted his horse and rode off toward town, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. As soon as he was gone, Jack holstered his gun and dropped to his knees beside Hannah. Let me see, he said gently, his hands hovering over her but not touching, waiting for permission. Hannah uncurled slowly, whimpering as her bruised body protested the movement. Jack's face went white as he took in the damage. Her dress was torn, dirt and blood streaking the fabric. Bruises were already forming on her arms and face. I need to get you to the doctor, Jack said. No, Hannah gasped. Just help me inside, please. Jack scooped her up as carefully as if she were made of glass and carried her into the cabin. He laid her on the bed and found a basin and cloth, gently cleaning the dirt and blood from her face. His hands were steady, but Hannah could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, the barely controlled rage in his eyes. I should have killed him, Jack said quietly. I wanted to, but you did not, Hannah managed. You saved me instead. Jack finished cleaning her wounds and sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand carefully. He is not coming back, Hannah. I will make sure of it. You are free. The word hung in the air between them, strange and wonderful and terrifying. Free. Hannah had not been free since she was 20 years old and foolish enough to marry a handsome man with a dark soul. Now, at 23, battered and scared but alive, she had another chance. What do I do now? She whispered. You heal, Jack said. You rest, and then you decide what kind of life you want to build. Whatever you choose, I will help you. If you want me in that life, I am yours. If you need time or space or something else entirely, I will respect that. But you are not alone anymore, Hannah. I promise you that. Hannah squeezed his hand, tears running down her bruised cheeks. I want you in my life, she said. I want that more than anything. But I do not want you to feel obligated because you saved me or because you pity me. Jack leaned down and kissed her forehead with exquisite gentleness. What I feel for you has nothing to do with pity or obligation. I love you, Hannah Novak. I think I have loved you since that first day in the general store, when you looked at me with those scared eyes, but still had the strength to take that baking powder from my hand. You are the strongest, bravest person I have ever met, and I would count myself lucky beyond measure if you let me spend my life proving that to you. I love you too, Hannah whispered. I did not know love could feel like this, safe and warm and right. Jack stayed with her through the night, sleeping in a chair beside the bed, keeping watch in case Victor returned. But Victor was truly gone. Word came the next day that he had taken his things from the boarding house where he kept a room and ridden out of town heading south. Some said he had mentioned California, others thought he would end up back in Denver. No one particularly cared, least of all Hannah. The next weeks were a study in healing, both physical and emotional. Jack visited Hannah every day, bringing food and supplies, helping with chores, sitting with her as she regained her strength. He was patient and kind, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, content to simply be near her. The people of Cripple Creek surprised Hannah with their support. Mrs. Patterson came by with soup and fresh bread, staying to chat and deliberately not mentioning Victor or asking uncomfortable questions. Other women from town followed her example, bringing casseroles and offers of help. Even the sheriff stopped by, making it clear that if Victor ever returned, there would be a warrant waiting for him. It was not until November, when Hannah's bruises had faded to yellow shadows and her ribs no longer ached with every breath, that she and Jack discussed the future in earnest. They sat in her cabin on a snowy evening, the fire crackling in the hearth, and Jack took her hand. "I have been thinking," he said, "about us and what comes next." Hannah's heart sped up. "And what have you decided?" "That I want to marry you," Jack said simply. "Not right away, not until you are ready, and until enough time has passed that people will not talk too much. But eventually, when you are healed and free, I want you to be my wife, if you will have me." Hannah felt joy bloom in her chest, warm and bright as the fire. "Yes," she said, "1,000 times yes. But Jack, I am still married to Victor, at least in the eyes of the law. Divorce is complicated and expensive." "I have been looking into that," Jack said. "There is a lawyer in Denver who specializes in such cases. With Victor gone and witnesses to his abuse, we have grounds. It will take time, maybe a year or more, but it can be done." "A year," Hannah repeated. It seemed like an eternity, and no time at all. "Or we could do what many couples out here do," Jack said carefully. "We could simply start over somewhere else, under a different name. No one in California or Oregon would know or care about your past. We could be Jack and Hannah Crawford, married and starting fresh." Hannah considered that. The idea of running away was tempting, but it also felt like letting Victor win, letting him drive her from her home and her life. "No," she said finally. "I want to do this properly. I want to be legally free of him so there is no shadow hanging over us. I will wait as long as it takes." Jack smiled and pulled her into his arms. "Then we wait," he agreed. Together. They spent that winter in a strange sort of courtship, public enough to be proper, but private enough to nurture their growing love. Jack moved into the boarding house in town, taking a room there so he could be close without causing scandal. He continued working at the Double C Ranch, saving his money for their future. Hannah kept the cabin, supporting herself by taking in sewing and doing laundry for some of the town's bachelors. It was hard work, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. The divorce proceedings began in February. The lawyer Jack had found, a sharp-minded man named Theodore Barnes, took Hannah's case and built a compelling argument for cruelty and abandonment. Several townspeople, including Mrs. Patterson and even the sheriff, provided statements attesting to Victor's violence and Hannah's character. The process was slow and frustrating, tangled in legal formalities and court schedules, but it moved forward. Spring came to Cripple Creek, turning the brown hills green and filling the air with the scent of wildflowers. Jack took Hannah on picnics by the creek where they had first kissed, long, lazy afternoons where they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his plans for the future, how he had been saving to buy his own small ranch, nothing fancy but a place where they could build a life together. Hannah shared her dreams too, simple things like a real garden, maybe some chickens, children someday when the time was right. One evening in late May, they lay on a blanket beside the creek, watching the sunset paint the sky. Jack propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at Hannah with an expression that made her breath catch. "What?" she asked, smiling. "I was just thinking how beautiful you are," Jack said. "Especially when you smile like that. I wish I could freeze this moment, keep it forever." "You say the most wonderful things," Hannah said, reaching up to touch his face. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I am the lucky one," Jack insisted. He leaned down and kissed her, slow and deep, his hand cradling her face, like she was something precious. The kiss grew more heated, and Hannah felt desire pool in her belly, warm and insistent. She pulled Jack closer, wanting to feel his weight on her, to be surrounded by him. "Hannah," Jack said, his voice rough. He pulled back slightly, his blue eyes dark with want but also restraint. We should stop. I want you so much it is killing me, but I want to do this right. I want to marry you first, give you my name and my vows before anything else. Hannah loved him even more for his restraint, for respecting her even when they both wanted to throw caution aside. You are right, she said, though her body protested. But soon, Jack. As soon as the divorce is final, I want to marry you immediately. The moment that paper is signed, I am dragging you to the nearest preacher, Jack promised, making her laugh. The divorce was finalized in August, a full year after Jack had first intervened to protect Hannah at the market. The judge granted it on grounds of cruelty and desertion, and Victor did not even appear to contest it. Hannah walked out of that Denver courtroom, a free woman, legally single for the first time in 4 years. Jack was waiting outside, leaning against the courthouse wall with his hat tilted back. When Hannah emerged, papers in hand and tears of relief streaming down her face, he swept her up in a spinning hug that made her squeal with laughter. You are free, he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. Truly free. I am, Hannah agreed, hardly believing it. She looked at the dissolution papers in her hand, official and final. So what now? Jack pulled a ring from his pocket, simple gold with a small diamond chip. Now I ask you properly, Hannah Novak, will you do me the tremendous honor of becoming my wife? Hannah's tears returned, but these were happy ones. Yes, she said, absolutely yes. They were married 3 days later in Cripple Creek's small church, with Mrs. Patterson and her husband standing as witnesses. Hannah wore a dress of soft blue calico, the same fabric she had admired in the store more than a year ago, which Mrs. Patterson had sewn for her as a wedding gift. Jack wore his best shirt and a new black vest, his dark hair neatly combed, his blue eyes shining with joy. The ceremony was simple and brief, but every word felt weighted with meaning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jack kissed Hannah with such tenderness that Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief. Walking back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Jack Crawford felt like stepping into a new life, leaving all the pain and fear of the past behind. Jack had rented a small house on the edge of town for them, a real house with 2 bedrooms and a kitchen with a new stove. Hannah walked through it in wonder, touching the curtains Jack had hung himself, the quilt on the bed that Mrs. Patterson and some other ladies had made, the bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen table. It was modest, but perfect, a home built on love instead of fear. That night, their wedding night, Jack carried Hannah over the threshold and set her down gently in the bedroom. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting silver patterns across the quilt. Jack cupped Hannah's face in his hands, his expression serious. I want to make you happy, he said. In every way possible. If I ever do anything that frightens you or reminds you of him, you tell me immediately. Promise me that. Hannah's heart swelled with love for this man who thought of her comfort even now. I promise, she said. But Jack, you are nothing like Victor. You never could be. I trust you completely. She kissed him then, pouring all her love and desire and trust into that kiss. Jack responded with matching passion, his hands gentle as they began to remove the pins from her hair. Freed from its restraints, her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and Jack ran his fingers through it with something like reverence. They undressed each other slowly, pausing to kiss and touch, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. When Jack finally lowered Hannah onto the bed and joined their bodies together, it was nothing like the rough, selfish encounters she had endured with Victor. This was mutual pleasure, giving and receiving in equal measure. Jack watched her face constantly, checking that she was comfortable, that she was enjoying herself. When Hannah cried out in pleasure, Jack held her through it, whispering how much he loved her, how beautiful she was. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Hannah's head on Jack's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. She traced patterns on his skin, marveling at how different life looked now compared to just a year ago. "What are you thinking?" Jack asked, his hand stroking her hair. "That I am happier than I ever imagined possible," Hannah said honestly. "That I did not know life could be like this." Jack kissed the top of her head. "This is just the beginning," he promised. "We have a whole lifetime ahead of us." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Jack continued working at the Double C Ranch while saving aggressively for his dream of buying his own place. Hannah kept taking in sewing, but also began selling preserves and baked goods, her skills turning into a modest income. They were not wealthy, but they had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. Their first Christmas as a married couple was magical. Jack cut down a small pine tree and brought it into the house, and Hannah decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper stars. They exchanged simple gifts, Jack giving Hannah a new sewing basket, and Hannah giving Jack a hand-knitted scarf. They spent the day in bed, making love and talking and laughing, the world outside forgotten. In the spring of 1883, Jack came home with news. "The Henderson place is for sale," he said, barely containing his excitement. "Old man Henderson is moving to live with his daughter in Kansas City. He is asking a fair price, and I have saved almost enough. If you are willing to live frugally for another few months, I think we could buy it." Hannah threw her arms around his neck. "Of course I am willing. Our own ranch, Jack. Truly ours." They purchased the Henderson property in June, a modest spread with 80 acres of grazing land, a sturdy house, a barn, and a small creek running through the eastern section. It was not grand, but it was theirs, and they attacked the work of building their ranch with enthusiasm. Jack hired on 2 young cowboys to help with the cattle he was accumulating through savvy trades and purchases. Hannah planted an enormous garden and got her chickens at last, a dozen Rhode Island Reds that provided eggs to sell in town. Life was hard work, but deeply satisfying. They fell into bed each night exhausted but content, always finding energy to reach for each other, to reaffirm their love through touch and whispered words. Hannah had never felt more alive, more herself. She laughed freely now, her face losing the pinched, frightened look she had worn during her marriage to Victor. Jack bloomed too, his natural kindness and humor having space to expand now that they were building something together. In October of 1883, Hannah realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another few weeks to be sure before telling Jack, wanting to be certain before raising his hopes. When she was finally confident, she told him over dinner one evening. "Jack, I have news," she said, setting down her fork. "I am pregnant." Jack's face went through several expressions in quick succession: shock, joy, fear, more joy. He stood up so fast, his chair nearly tipped over, and pulled Hannah into his arms. "Truly?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Truly," Hannah confirmed, laughing through happy tears. "We are going to have a baby." Jack kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "A baby," he kept repeating, as if trying to make it real. "Our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Hannah continued working as long as she could, though Jack fussed over her constantly, worried she was doing too much. She bloomed in pregnancy, her happiness evident in her glowing skin and easy smiles. Jack built a cradle from scratch, sanding the wood until it was silky smooth, determined that their child would have something made with love. They discussed names endlessly. Jack wanted to name a daughter after his mother, but Hannah gently pointed out that might bring sad memories. Instead, they settled on Lily for a girl, like the flowers that grew wild by the creek, and Daniel for a boy, a strong name that Jack liked. On a warm evening in June of 1884, Hannah went into labor. Jack rode like the devil to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Callahan, who had delivered half the babies in Cripple Creek. The labor was long and difficult, and Jack paced outside the bedroom for hours, praying and worrying in equal measure. When he finally heard a baby's cry, thin and outraged, he burst through the door before Mrs. Callahan could call him. Hannah lay on the bed, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in white linen. "It is a boy," she said, her voice tired but filled with joy. "A healthy baby boy." Jack approached slowly, awed by the tiny person in Hannah's arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was currently waving his fists and crying. When Jack reached out a tentative finger, the baby's tiny hand closed around it instinctively, and Jack felt his heart crack open with love so intense it was almost painful. "Hello, Daniel," he whispered. "I am your father, and I promise you right now that I will spend every day of my life making sure you are safe and loved and happy." Hannah smiled up at him, their son between them, and Jack knew that this was what he had been waiting for all his life. Not just Hannah, though he loved her more than breath itself, but this, a family built on love and respect and partnership. A chance to be the father his own father had never been, to create a home where children grew up knowing they were cherished. The years that followed were filled with the joyful chaos of raising a child while building a ranch. Daniel was a happy baby who grew into an adventurous toddler, always underfoot, always curious. Jack proved to be a patient and loving father, taking Daniel everywhere with him once the boy was old enough, teaching him about horses and cattle, letting him help with chores in ways that usually made everything take twice as long, but filled both of them with joy. In 1886, Hannah became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in February of 1887, coming quickly in the middle of a snowstorm that prevented the midwife from arriving in time. Jack delivered his own daughter with Hannah coaching him through it, both of them terrified and exhilarated. They named her Rose, another flower name, and she proved to be as beautiful and delicate as her namesake, with Hannah's blonde hair and Jack's blue eyes. The Crawford Ranch prospered. Jack's skill with cattle and horses, combined with Hannah's business sense and hard work, made them successful by the standards of small ranchers. They were never wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to hire the help they needed, and even put money away for the children's future. More importantly, they built a reputation for fairness and kindness, treating their hired hands well and being good neighbors to the other ranchers in the area. Victor never returned. Hannah occasionally wondered what had become of him, but mostly she did not think about him at all. That life felt like it had happened to someone else, a different Hannah who had not yet learned her own strength. The only time she thought of him was when she looked at Jack and felt grateful beyond measure that fate had brought them together, that she had been brave enough to accept his help, that she had survived long enough to find real love. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1892, Jack woke Hannah before dawn and told her to dress warmly. She followed him outside, confused, to find two horses saddled and waiting. Daniel, now 8 years old, and Rose, 5, were being watched by their hired hand's wife for the day. "Where are we going?" Hannah asked as they rode out into the pre-dawn darkness. "You will see," Jack said mysteriously. He led her to the creek where they had first kissed, where they had spent so many afternoons falling in love. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The cottonwood trees had grown taller over the years, their leaves rustling in the morning breeze. Jack spread out a blanket and pulled food from his saddlebags, a picnic breakfast. They ate and talked, remembering that first day and all the days since. Jack took Hannah's hand, and she saw that his eyes were suspiciously bright. "What is this about?" she asked gently. "I was thinking about how much has changed in 10 years, Jack said. How that scared woman in the general store became this confident, happy person beside me. How we built a life and a family from nothing but hope and hard work. And I wanted to make sure you knew that I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every difficult moment, every worry, every challenge. All of it has been worth it, because I got to do it with you." Hannah felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I love you," she said simply. "I love the life we built, the family we created. You saved me, Jack, in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," Jack said. "You gave me purpose and a reason to stay in one place, a home to come back to. You made me a better man." They kissed there under the cottonwood trees, just as they had all those years ago, the sun warming their faces, and the sound of the creek providing a soundtrack to their love. When they finally pulled apart, Hannah looked at Jack and knew that this was what happily ever after really meant. Not a fairy tale ending, but a choice made every day to love and support each other, to build something beautiful together. They rode back to the ranch as the morning warmed, eager to return to their children and their work and their life. Daniel came running when he heard the horses, Rose toddling behind him, and Jack scooped them both up in his strong arms. Hannah watched her husband with their children and felt her heart overflow with gratitude and love. That evening, after the children were asleep, Hannah and Jack sat on their porch, watching the stars come out. Jack's arm was around her shoulders, and she was tucked against his side, perfectly content. "Do you ever wonder how different life would be if I had not been in the general store that day?" Hannah asked. "All the time," Jack admitted. "And then I thank God that I was, that I made the choice to speak to you, to help you. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Hannah corrected, smiling. "The best was asking me to marry you." Jack laughed and kissed her temple. "You're right about that." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the soft rustle of wind through grass. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds, surrounded by love. In the barn, their horses rested. In the fields, their cattle grazed. Everything they had built together, everything they had fought for, surrounded them. The years continued to be kind to the Crawford family. Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man who shared his father's skill with horses and his mother's quick mind. Rose developed into a spirited girl with a gift for music, playing the piano that Hannah and Jack had scrimped and saved to buy for her. In 1895, Hannah gave birth to a third child, another son they named Thomas, giving them a complete and noisy household that rang with laughter and love. Jack never raised his hand to Hannah or their children, not once in all their years together. He was firm when he needed to be, but always fair, always patient. His children grew up knowing they were loved unconditionally, and they flourished under that certainty. When Daniel was old enough to understand, Jack told him about his own father, about the violence and the fear, and about the promise he had made to himself to be different. It became part of the family story, a reminder that the cycle of abuse could be broken, that love was stronger than anger. Hannah continued to surprise herself with her own strength. She became known in Cripple Creek and the surrounding area as a woman of wisdom and kindness, someone younger wives came to for advice, someone who would help a neighbor in need without question or judgment. She never forgot what it felt like to be trapped and scared, and she made it her mission to help other women who found themselves in similar situations. Over the years, she quietly helped several women escape abusive marriages, providing them with resources and support and, when necessary, a place to stay. Jack supported this work fully, often providing the muscle needed to convince violent men to leave their wives alone. In 1900, Jack and Hannah celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary. They had grown older, laugh lines etched at the corners of their eyes, silver threads appearing in their hair, but the love between them had only deepened. They still held hands without thinking about it, still stole kisses when they thought the children were not looking, still talked late into the night about everything and nothing. On a crisp autumn afternoon, with leaves turning gold and the air smelling of coming winter, Hannah stood in her kitchen, making preserves while watching Jack through the window. He was in the corral, working with a young horse, patient and steady, talking to the animal in that low, calm voice he used. Daniel was beside him learning, and Rose was nearby mending tack, Thomas playing at her feet. The ranch was thriving, her family was healthy and happy, and Hannah felt such contentment that it almost overwhelmed her. Mrs. Patterson, now quite elderly, visited later that day for tea. They sat in Hannah's cozy parlor, and the older woman looked at Hannah with satisfaction. "I remember the first time I saw you," Mrs. Patterson said. "Scared and bruised, buying supplies as fast as you could. I never imagined you would become this person, running a successful ranch, raising beautiful children, helping so many others. Hannah smiled and poured tea. I could not have imagined it either, but Jack showed me that I could be more than I thought. He gave me the space and time to become myself. He is a good man, Mrs. Patterson agreed. But you are the one who did the work, dear. He supported you, yes, but you are the one who chose to heal, to grow, to build this life. Never forget that. Hannah nodded, understanding the truth in those words. Jack had been her catalyst, but the strength had always been inside her, waiting to be recognized and claimed. As the years rolled into the new century, the Crawford family continued to thrive. Daniel married a sweet-natured girl from a neighboring ranch in 1903, and Hannah became a grandmother when Daniel's wife gave birth to twin girls in 1904. Rose showed no interest in marriage yet, instead dreaming of attending a music conservatory in Denver, which Jack and Hannah had already begun saving for. Thomas was shaping up to be a scholar, always with his nose in a book, talking about maybe becoming a lawyer someday. Jack and Hannah watched their children grow and make their own choices, providing guidance when asked but respecting their independence. It was the kind of parenting that came from being truly secure in their love for each other and their children, not needing to control but wanting to support. On a summer evening in 1905, Jack and Hannah took a rare evening alone, leaving the children in charge of the ranch for the night. They rode out to their spot by the creek, the place where their love story had really begun. The cottonwood trees were massive now, providing deep shade. The creek still burbled over the stones, and wildflowers dotted the banks. They spread out a blanket, and Jack pulled Hannah down beside him. She was 47 now, and he was 51, but when he looked at her, she still saw the same love and desire in his eyes that had been there on their wedding night 23 years ago. I was thinking, Jack said, about how much time has passed since that first day in the general store. 24 years, Hannah. Nearly a quarter of a century. 24 years since you told me to take all the time I needed. Hannah remembered. The kindest thing anyone had ever said to me. You have taken that time and made such an incredible life with it, Jack said. You inspire me every single day. Hannah kissed him, long and slow and deep. We made this life together, she corrected. Every bit of it, together. They stayed at the creek until the stars came out, talking about the past and planning for the future. There was talk of maybe taking a trip back east to see some cities, of renovating the ranch house now that they could afford it, of watching their grandchildren grow. But mostly they just enjoyed being together, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. As they rode back to the ranch under the stars, Jack reached over and took Hannah's hand. I love you, he said. I know I say it all the time, but I want you to know I mean it every single time. I know, Hannah said softly. I love you too, Jack Crawford. More than words can say. They arrived home to find the house lit up and welcoming, their children having prepared a late supper for them. The family gathered around the table, talking and laughing, and Hannah looked at each beloved face and felt such profound gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought Jack into her life. She thought about that terrified woman she had been, buying supplies in a panic, wearing bruises like badges of shame. She thought about the first time Jack had spoken to her, the first time he had protected her, the first time they had kissed. She thought about their wedding day, the births of their children, every triumph and challenge they had faced together. And she knew that every moment of difficulty had been worth it to arrive here, in this place of love and safety and joy. Jack caught her eye across the table and winked, and Hannah smiled back, a smile that held 24 years of shared history and the promise of however many years they had left. They had taken something broken and built it into something beautiful. They had proven that love, real love, was patient and kind and strong enough to overcome anything. That night, as they lay in bed with Jack's arms around her, Hannah whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for giving me all the time I needed." Jack tightened his arms around her. "Thank you for choosing to spend it with me." And in the quiet of their bedroom, Surrounded by the life they had built together, Hannah and Jack Crawford drifted off to sleep, content in the knowledge that their love story, which had begun with a simple act of kindness in a general store 24 years ago, would continue on for all the days they had left together. They had found their happily ever after, not perfect, but real, not easy, but absolutely worth it, and that was more than enough.